Hi everyone, welcome to this week's Desteni I Process Live Google Hangout. I'm Christina and I'm your host for this week's topic, which we are continuing the working environment series. Tonight we're going to talk about specifically the workaholic. Last week we talked a bit about the resistance to working, and tonight we're going to talk a little bit about the opposite experience where you have just that drive to work and work and work and work and work. I have two people joining me who have identified themselves and can relate to that experience of being a workaholic. I have Gabrielle Goodrow from outside of Boston, Massachusetts in the U.S. Hey, Gabrielle.
Hi, Christina. Hey, Andrew.
Yep, and then we also have Andrew Gable joining us from British Columbia in Canada. Hello, Andrew.
Hello.
If you guys want to join in the discussion, you're more than welcome to. Go to the Desteni I Process Google Plus page and click on the Q&A app. There you can submit any questions, and we will be discussing for about 40 minutes, so make sure you get your comments and questions in. If you're watching from the YouTube page, go ahead and click on Be a Part of the Conversation on the video, and that will take you to the Google Plus page where you can sign into your account and then participate. So we're going to just jump right in. I personally don't have much experience in relation to being a workaholic. I never identified myself as that word, and actually in preparation for this hangout and talking to Gabrielle and Andrew, I found that my definition of the word workaholic was really limited. I saw it as this negative thing that was unhealthy to be, or to be defined as a workaholic was not a good thing. And I kind of, in looking at the definition for myself and talking to Gabrielle and Andrew, I found that, there's a lot more going on within the workaholic, and there can be some actual practical beneficial things within that in terms of self-development and getting to know yourself. So we're going to just jump right in. Gabrielle, why don't you tell us a little bit about your experience with being a workaholic and what kind of why you identified yourself as a workaholic.
Okay. Growing up, I was in a big family, so I always had to take part in doing like chores around the house and helping in the garden. I like to be working outside more, so I used to do like raking and things like that. And so from a young age, I always had a sense of, things have to be done and you have to put effort in to get them done, and everyone has to do things that they necessarily don't want to do, like work stuff. So I realized that, when I do make the effort and rake all the leaves, it comes out to be a nice clean yard. So I kind of saw the benefit of doing the work. So that just led me into adulthood, where I saw if I do work, then, I'll get benefit out of it. And so I just push myself in work, and over time, I guess that's it.
So it wasn't like it's kind of like that principle of just doing what's necessary to be done. It wasn't like, I mean, did you enjoy working as much as you did because of the result, or was it just like you do what you got to do and?
Yeah, it was more like I have to do it basically to survive. So I just kind of embraced it and did it, and didn't really have any negative reaction to it, because I realized I have to do it to make money, so I might as well just, enjoy what I can out of it and do my best at it.
Yeah, and push the limits, which I think you'll tell us more about later.
Yeah.
Andrew, why don't you tell us about your experience with being a workaholic?
Sure. So, yeah, my experience, I would say, started in childhood also, but a little bit different because, I never liked working. I remember, we did work quite a bit, and I did establish a work ethic when I was younger, which I'm grateful now today. But within that, I also developed quite a resistance to actually working and doing hard work. Even though I was able to do it, I just never really liked doing it. And so, in my late teens, I used to do a lot of art also in my childhood, early years, and I kind of started looking at this point of, well, maybe this is something I could do as a career, because it was something that I was exposed to in my family in terms of art was something that was a part of the family. And so from my perspective, it was a no-brainer. Why would I do a job that I didn't necessarily like to do? Because I did observe when I was younger that a lot of people seemed to be doing things that they didn't really like doing, and I didn't really understand why that was. And so yeah, like I said, it was a bit of a no-brainer in terms of wanting to do art instead of doing a job that I didn't want to do. And so I guess from that perspective, I in a way became a workaholic, you could say, or possessed with doing art as a way to escape having to work in a different job that I didn't want to do, which eventually drove me to work in an imbalanced way in terms of doing art. So a little bit of background there.
So what did you guys see in terms of, like, I mean, what particularly or specifically made you consider that you're a workaholic? Like, I mean, I understand my perspective of a workaholic is someone who works all day and is hardly ever home, and all of their time is spent working, basically. So what did you guys see specifically that kind of you could say, okay, I may be a workaholic here? Like what did you guys see in terms of, like, how were you able to identify yourselves as a workaholic? Andrew, do you, or Garb?
Sure, yeah. Well, it's interesting because I never actually considered myself a workaholic until I started looking at this point of the Hangout, because, from my perspective, I was doing artwork. To me, that wasn't work. So, yeah, I never really actually even considered myself a workaholic, but when I started then looking back at the patterns that I was living, that's exactly what I was doing. I was working, an insane amount of hours, and I was essentially neglecting various other aspects of my life and focused only on working. Yeah, and in my case, it was primarily, or one of the main points driving it was a point of escaping my reality. So, yeah, I never considered myself a workaholic, but yeah, I do fit the mold.
Yeah, and you talk a little bit about what drove you into that kind of pattern of working so much. Gabrielle, what was your starting point that you saw? I mean, you spoke a little bit about seeing the reward of you do this work and you have a clean environment, or you go and put in these hours and you get this money back, but what was your starting point you noticed for working? I mean, you were talking about you've put in almost 80 hours a week before. I mean, you've done that kind of work, which seems crazy to me. Yeah. So I mean, what was your drive? What was your starting point?
Right. So when I was looking at the word workaholic and I was, writing to you about my experience, I didn't see it as something that was negative. So I looked at myself and I saw, like, working and working hard and, pushing yourself, you get rewards out of that. So it was something that I enjoyed doing because I like to have, money to be able to do what I wanted. So, and also I saw that if I take shifts, like if I do things that people ask me to do, like my managers, then I would be able to, when I needed, like, time off, I would be able to always get that because I was always the one that took the hours. So I never had any problem getting time off because I always, I gave myself as well. So it's kind of that give and you receive principle playing out there.
Yeah.
So yeah, I worked, me as a workaholic, I did again work 80 hours a week at one point in my life. So I was just working, like, all the time, overnights as well. So I was working through the night. So just basically burning my body out, just being so tired that, I couldn't get to the things I needed to get to. So yeah, that's how I kind of identified with workaholic.
Yeah. Andrew, what was, I mean, you talked a little bit about your starting point being an escape from the real work, and so you're doing art, and it's like, this is nice, and I can do 16-hour days, and it's not really a problem. But what kind of problems did you see from relationship?
Well, yeah, when I started looking at, what was driving me to do it, it was interesting because there was a few, different points, and I did mention that one of I was essentially trying to escape the real world. I did not want to face, going out in the system and getting a regular job, so to speak. And so that was really driving me initially, I suppose, and throughout. But as I got into it more, there was different points that became incentives or motivation. And, when I got into art school, there was the whole competition point that came up. And so that then started to become another motivating factor in terms of why I would push myself to the length that I would in terms of how many hours I was working. Because ultimately I just wanted to be better than my peers. And so, yeah, there was positive things that I did enjoy about working a lot. There was certain parts about myself that I, transcended or overcame, like such as resistances and stuff. I enjoyed motivating myself and bettering myself, and being able to work more hours. So there was benefits to working as much as I did, but ultimately it was completely imbalanced. There was various consequences that I didn't see or consider at the time that were busy taking place. So yeah.
Can you give us an example
Of the consequences?
Yeah.
Yeah. There was a lot, really. Like when I look back on it now, I would skip meals quite a bit. Like I wouldn't eat very much. I mean, I would, but I did notice there was a pattern or a habit of skipping meals, and just because I wasn't hungry, or I was able to ignore my hunger because I was, apparently so interested or captivated with what I was doing, but it was really more of an obsession. That was one thing. Like I said, because I was using it to avoid real life, I never actually took care of my financial stability because of it. So it was interesting because here I was a workaholic, yet I wasn't making money from it. So that wasn't necessarily a motivation. Maybe in my mind it was a motivation. Eventually I'll make a lot of money by doing this. But that was a major consequence. I never really learned how to be practical with my life in terms of taking care of all of the necessities of what needs to be done, practically speaking, in the system, doing your taxes, getting health care, for instance, things like that. I just avoided all of that at all costs. My relationships obviously were non-existent because I didn't have any, because I didn't want any, because I just wanted to paint all day. And so I never really developed that ability to hold down effective relationships that were really, intimate in a way. Here I had like lots of friends in art school, which, I would consider we were good friends, but, when I look at it, I can see that there was an imbalance taking place with regards to my relationships, just because I was so single-minded. My overall experience of myself was quite negative, I would say. A major consequence that really probably got me thinking about what I was doing was that I found if I was outside of my studio, I was irritated or aggravated, and I could only be satisfied and I could only relax if I worked, so many hours every day. And it was becoming quite a prominent point in my life where I was noticing this happening. I was noticing, I was very short-tempered with my girlfriend at the time, and I just was, like I couldn't understand what was going on, and I noticed, I understood there was a problem. So those are a few of the consequences that emerged from just putting the blinders on and being a workaholic.
Yeah. Gabrielle, what would you say is, why is it important? Because like I asked the question, what was your starting point? That can create these kind of consequences. Can you explain to us, or just give us a perspective of why is it important that we, within the Destini community, we look at our starting point for why we do what we do. So can you just explain to us why is it important we do that? Why is it relevant to know why you do something or why you put in the hours that you work?
Right. So yeah, obviously, why you're doing something is important to understand, because if you don't have that why, then you're not going to be able to be effective in what you're doing. So through working, I'm not saying that I understood exactly why I was doing what I was doing. I was more, in the beginning, I was more driven by, just basically accumulating money and being able to have that freedom with money. So I was able to, move out of my house and, buy things that I wanted and things like that. So that was, the money in the beginning was the motivation for me. I got to go on trips. Like, I like skiing a lot, so we'd go skiing every weekend. And so I was able to, and through that I was able to schedule myself in a way, that helped me, schedule myself basically. So I was able to fit everything in that I needed to do and basically make my time very efficient. And that's something I learned through working so much. And so then after, I began Destini and I started looking at, what I'm doing and why, I more started focusing on, doing things that will help do what I want to do in the end goal, which is support, different projects that we're doing, support myself to be someone that can be trustworthy and, doing the best of my ability. So, yeah. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, and that's cool because that came up in previous Hangouts, looking at work as being, something that you can actually develop and practice the principles that we learn within the Desteni I process. Work is an environment in which we can actually apply that. So it's like, you push yourself to work 40 plus hours a week, and if it's a clear, starting point and not based in an obsession or a possession where you're completely consumed by it, it could potentially support you to expand and learn, how to live discipline and consistency and responsibility, So, yeah, obviously being a workaholic doesn't have to be a bad thing. Like we had mentioned before, there are people who have been really cool examples of being consistently applying themselves in every moment, that it was like a practical workaholic is someone who just is, busy every day, every moment, doing something, directing themselves, yeah, so that is cool. I do have a comment from Marlene. Andrew, were you going to say something?
Go ahead with the comment.
We have a comment from Marlene, and she's saying, I can definitely attest that Andrew is a workaholic. He would be one of the first and the last to leave in construction work. I'm assuming she's talking about the farming. Have you guys found that focusing too much on work becomes an escapism to other aspects of your life? Thanks. I'm going to just answer this really quick because, when we were working on this, preparing for this hangout, I never really felt like I could relate to being a workaholic, and it wasn't like something that I ever classified myself as. But that comment is very cool, Marlene, because it actually opens up to, I can see where I would use work to avoid other responsibilities. It's like, oh, I'm going to pick up an extra shift because I don't really want to be at home and take care of other things that I have to do at home. It's like, it was a point of escapism. So I guess I can actually relate to that, trying to avoid certain responsibilities at home, or like creating busyness for myself so that I didn't have to, direct certain other aspects of my life. Can you guys relate to that, or anything to share about that comment?
Yeah. Oh, first I just want to mention that competition point. Basically, like the example that Marlon gave in terms of the farm, why I would, get up and work in the morning, and and then I would stay later or push myself to work longer hours because I would just look over and I would be like, hey, Marlon is still working over there, and basically that means I would have to keep working because like Marlon's still working, so I got to keep working. And I just want to mention that's one of the motivations why I work on the farm in that way.
So would you say that that's would you say that that's a practical starting point? Like, would you say that that is a starting point that you can work with, or is that something that, I mean, how would you reflect on that starting point?
That's a really good question, and I think it is. I think there is such thing as healthy competition. Initially, I just thought all competition is bad, but no, I mean, like, if you see somebody that is effective in your reality, that's great. You can use them as a motivation for you or as a standard of what's possible, and you can support yourself to become stronger, for instance, in working, which is kind of related to what you were saying. It's just that point, because you were saying you scheduled shifts because you just wanted to be busy. You didn't want to face something in reality. I actually forgot exactly what I was going to say about that, but it's something to do with just becoming a practical workaholic, where you're aware of why you're making the decision to work the way you are. And I think as long as you're doing that, then you can support yourself to make sure that the hours you are working, whether it's a lot or isn't a lot, is effective. Just because you work a lot doesn't mean that it's a bad thing at all. So.
Yeah. Gabrielle, can you tell us a little bit about, because I think overall your experience with the Workaholic was supportive in your development and learning, how to really kind of push yourself, and to even that whole equation of, you do this and you get this result, and kind of working with that, process. That's really cool. But can you talk about maybe when you started to see some negative consequences in your life, and what you kind of did to support yourself to change that?
Yeah, some negative things that I saw was that I, again, was very tired. Like, I pretty much burned myself out because, 80 hours a week is kind of excessive. So, just basically just being so tired, not being able to do, like, be with friends or go out and do things that are fun because, I was too tired. I wanted to hang in and just, pretty much do nothing. And another thing that I saw was that by working so much, I kind of imbalanced my, like, relaxed time for myself, and, like, giving myself the time to, just relax and do nothing and just chill out and, kind of make time for me and my space. And that kind of, I kind of lost that within the whole working so much. And I'm starting to learn how to do that now in my process, actually. So, just giving that space for myself to just, not be feeling like I need to always be doing something and, be productive. I can, just sit and have a conversation with someone and just, converse, and that's it. So.
Yeah. Did you find that if you weren't working, you were, like Andrew had mentioned, if he wasn't working and he was out of his studio, he would be, like, agitated or annoyed? Did you find that also if you weren't working? Was there, like, a point within you where it's like, I should be working right now, like, I should not be here, or I could be doing more?
Yeah, I did feel that way. Like, even like watching a movie, I'd be like, I can be, like, writing a blog, or I can be doing this and that. It's like not allowing that, time to just, relax and let the body relax and stuff. So, yeah, I had that as well, definitely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can see that too. It's all, and of course, it's based on ideas of, what we should be doing, or what's right or what's wrong, and, yeah. Andrew, do you have anything to share on that? What you were saying?
No, just that I can relate to that point of not being able to, even watch a movie. I remember with my girlfriend, I would have to work so many hours before I would allow myself to go and watch a movie. So, it wasn't until, was introduced to the principles of Destiny and the tools presented that I was able to actually start changing my relationship to work and to my reality. And I remember I had this moment one time where it had been probably a year or 2 years even since I had sort of started moving away from my possessive relationship with doing art. And I was walking through a field, and I remember just being so grateful that I could walk through the field and just enjoy walking through the field. I could look out at I don't know if it was a sunset or just the sky or whatever, and just look out and enjoy nature. Because before I couldn't do that. If I was out in nature, I would just be thinking, oh, that's going to be really nice to paint, or I've got to get back to paint that, or I should have my paints with me, I should be painting that. And it was, and I remember just being so grateful that I wasn't having that entire experience kind of like within me, and I could just actually be in the moment. So it took quite a process, but yeah, I just remember that memory.
Yeah, that's cool. So speaking of it took a process, I mean, what specifically have you guys been able to do in incorporating more of a balanced relationship with work and home life? Like any particular tools you've used, or anything you want to share in terms of how you've been able to support yourself? Like I know, Garb, you were talking about a daily application you have to relax your body in the bath.
Yeah, I definitely find baths very relaxing, and I usually listen to EQOF in there, so I always have like EQOF going in that, so I just that's my time to just relax, or I do like different self-forgiveness points or things like that. So it's actually I'm actually still working because but yeah, it does relax me because of the heat of it. But yeah, I have a dog too, Henry, so he's stabilized me, and through that time of working to kind of ground me in like responsibilities, like he has to eat, he has to go out and play, and he got me out and exercised, and I'd run him a lot in the woods, and through that time I just allowed myself to just enjoy like nature and exercising and just being free, kind of free in a way of not having to have work get done, just kind of do my own thing and explore a bit in the woods with Henry and things like that. So yeah, I also skied a lot, so at that time, so I kind of used that as fun. Me and my ex-boyfriend would go skiing like a lot, so I always made sure that I balanced it with things that I like to do, traveling and things like that with people. So yeah, that's how I kind of balanced it.
So what would you guys do though in that moment where it's like, oh God, I should be working right now? Like how did you guys support yourself in that moment? I mean, did you guys use breathing? Did you use like self-forgiveness? Like I know Garvey said that you had you'll do self-forgiveness and stuff on certain points, but like I can see Andrew, your experience was quite extreme in terms of that possessive relationship with needing to be in the studio. Like how did you initially support yourself in those moments where you started to change that relationship? What would you do to support yourself?
So yeah, I mean, I did just work with the basic Destiny tools of writing, self-forgiveness, self-correction, breathing. The writing was obviously very important because it allowed me to start investigating various dimensions of why I was the way I was in relation to work, and also the principles of Destiny were important because they gave me sort of something to realign my life in relation to, because the world sort of has one set of guidelines, and there's no real, or I mean, I wasn't exposed to any other real alternatives in terms of how to approach my life differently. That's what Desteni was. It was something that where I could completely change, my entire structure of how I lived. So that was really important, I think, in terms of reestablishing certain values for myself that, where I value something that I didn't value before. So, in that moment when that anxiety would come up, because I had walked the process of writing about it, identifying it, working with the self-forgiveness, working with the self-commitment statements, whenever that anxiety would come up, it was like I would have a reference point where before I would just be completely controlled by this experience. I had no reference. I was just like a slave in a way to this experience. Where since working with the Desteni process, whenever that experience would come up, okay, I would be able to identify it immediately, and therefore I wouldn't be so easily moved by it. So I was a lot more stable within myself, and I would just breathe. Okay, I know that this is this experience in relation to this. And so within doing that, I would also then start looking at my reality in terms of, well, what's practical? Because before, I never had that question. Whenever that anxiety would come up, I would just follow it or be pushed by it, and I would go and paint. That was like the only thing I knew how to do, go and paint, go and paint. I never considered my reality holistically. I never looked at the various different dimensions of my reality that is absolutely essential in practical living. So now whenever I have that experience come up, it's like I can just settle myself down and I can check, okay, is work something that I need to do right now? And I can look at the other different areas of my life and just make a clear assessment instead of just being driven by some experience to do something.
Yeah, cool. Which is essentially the Desteni process, and why we do these hangouts. It's for us to be able to share the process that we're walking in terms of, what it comes down to is understanding our minds and who we are and why we do what we do and why we have certain relationships with certain things, like why we become possessed with going to work, why,
Exactly.
why we do what we do. So yeah, that's really cool. And for those that aren't familiar with the terms we've been using, like self-forgiveness and the application of breathing and writing and all that stuff, we do have on the YouTube page in the description area, we have all the links to the free courses that we do offer. Well, we offer one free course, DIP Light, and it's an awesome introductory course that really kind of takes you step by step through the basic understanding of these tools and how to apply them in your life and how to essentially get to know yourself. So check that out. We do have another comment from Marzana Rutkowski, and she is saying, hello guys, just want to ask you, being so busy, being a workaholic, so you say, did you have a tendency to judge other people who were not this busy in work? I can say that this happened to me. I mean, judging others who don't work so much. So I think she's saying that she had judged others who didn't have the same relationship to work. Can you guys relate to that? Did you also see that?
Yeah, I could definitely. Yeah, that was definitely something I had to walk through to realize that, not everybody is like me, and everybody is walking their own process. So it's not obviously to judge them and who they are within what they do, but realize that if I can support them in some way, give the support, and also learn from them, because there might be something that I don't know and I'm not doing well that they can share with me. So me, I definitely had to walk through that point.
Yeah, absolutely. That whole comparison point, you don't know what kind of gifts you can find from other people, and we're so easily we so easily compare ourselves to each other, as either being good or worse or whatever, and it's just an example of me having such a limited definition of a workaholic, and talking with Gabrielle, and her experience completely opened my mind to what a workaholic can actually be. It can be something practical and beneficial and supportive in one's development, Andrew, do you have anything to say about Marzana's comment?
Yeah, I found I would judge myself a lot, in relation to that point where I would see people that were effective at working or working lots of hours, and I would immediately go into self-judgment, like I'm not good enough, they're working this many hours, I'm just not good enough, I have to work more, I have to work more. So where now it's obviously, I realize that everybody's sort of walking a different path, so that point of judgment is not necessary, and it's to sort of stabilize myself and just, make sure I'm looking at my life, look at my reality and what's necessary for me to do, and then within that I can push myself also to become stronger. But so yeah, that judgment, I did find there was a judgment, but it was more, I would look at people and then judge myself for not being good enough, for not working enough.
So that was like the competition point that you kind of
it was the competition point, yeah.
Yeah, cool. So, okay, yeah, I mean, I guess, that's all I have for this evening. Do you guys have any last words or any suggestions you can give to anyone who's facing this point of being a workaholic? I mean, I can say, obviously it's definitely worth it to look within yourself and ask yourself, and no matter what you're doing, why do you do what you do? What is that starting point? What is that drive that's pushing you to put as many hours in as you do? Or, like Marlene asking about what are you escaping from, and really get to know why you are the way you are and why you do what you do. And obviously, within the Desteni community, we have the forum and the course that can really support in people learning how to do that. But do you guys have any last suggestions or comments for anyone facing such a point?
Yeah, I have to say that definitely balance your time, like find a balance, make sure you, if you are considered a workaholic, like Christina said, identify why you're doing what you're doing and for what reasons, but also within that, make sure you balance your time so you give yourself the rest and the the self-care that you deserve and you should give to yourself. So.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not like you can work for 80 hours a week and think that that's going to be sustaining, especially if you're not taking care of yourself with nutrition and rest and just overall, I think giving yourself the time to do something fun, go play with the dog, go skiing, watch a movie, I think that is just as important as a good meal and a good rest. Anything from you, Andrew?
Yeah, the point that came up just as I was listening here at the end is one thing I did notice about my, that competition point specifically, and what was driving me to be a workaholic was there was this point of, I was trying to be better. I was trying to essentially get validation or establish some sort of value for myself through my art and through what I was doing. So obviously that's been a real shift. And, a really cool point with working with Desteni is suddenly it's like, it was like a change in perspective. And so now I realize that that's not what value is. And so now in my life, it's a lot more about just looking at myself and considering the point of self-value. And, how do I give myself validation? It's not about what other people are giving me in terms of value. So I just do see that was quite an interesting point that came up in my writing yesterday about this point, was just, noticing that was one of the, just an interesting point in terms of being motivated to work because I was essentially wanting to sort of create some sort of value for myself, because I obviously didn't feel like I had any kind of value. So that's just an interesting aspect that came up yesterday. So how that's changed a lot now with me in my life, in terms of why maybe I'm able to sort of relax a little bit more, is because I'm working on establishing my own value for myself. So yeah, that's one thing.
Yeah, very cool. I have another comment from Marlene. She says, "Thank you guys for sharing. I realized I was or am walking through workaholism, and so have made it a point to give me a day when I can disconnect. And so in my case, realize the world won't fall by one day that I do something different and give me time." Absolutely. Marlene, I was actually talking to someone about having you come onto this hangout because you were also a self-identified workaholic. So that's very cool because, you know, to be a workaholic, from my perspective and what I've learned in this process, is it's not a bad thing. It can be actually very practical, and it's amazing what you can do with that kind of approach and discipline and you know, pushing yourself to really just go beyond what you think you're capable of, and with a consistent, you know, daily application, it is amazing what one can do, and I think the three of us and a lot of other people have seen prime examples of that. But it's also, of course, very important to give yourself that time to, you know, nestle into bed with a book or take a bath or go for a walk and not feel like you're going to, you know, things around you are going to collapse or you're going to miss something. You know, allow yourself to breathe and embrace the moment in no matter what you're doing, you know. Honor the fact that you're here, and, you know, space and time, you know, this physical reality, it's slow but sure in its existence. And so if only we can kind of slow ourselves down with that, we can actually really enjoy how much time we do have to do what we have to do, you know, and we don't have to feel rushed to do more or put in so many hours, you know. So anywho, that's all I have. So thank you guys for joining me. It was a really cool discussion. We will be back. Anna will be back next week, continuing with this working environment series. So we hope to see you guys then. Thanks, you guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks.